The wooden boards of Redrock's auction house creaked under the restless weight of boots, each step a rhythm of greed and anticipation. The late afternoon sun slanted through narrow, grimy windows, dust motes dancing like ghosts in the amber light. Outside, tumbleweeds clattered across the streets, stirred by a wind that carried the faint howl of distant coyotes. Inside, the air was thick with sweat, tobacco, and the sharp tang of fear. At the center of the room, a little girl with chestnut hair clung to the edge of the auction platform, her small frame trembling as rough hands scribbled numbers on ledgers and murmurs of offers rippled through the crowd. Lily's eyes were wide, gleaming with both terror and defiance. Her fingers gripped the coarse fabric of her dress, knuckles white, as she watched men lean forward, eyes glinting with ownership and greed. From the back, a giant silhouette cut through the shadows. Cade, tall, broad-shouldered, and imposing even in the muted light, leaned against the doorway, his spurred boots clicking softly on the floorboards. The room seemed to shrink around him. Whispers faltered, a few hearts skipped. His jaw was set, eyes narrowed, scanning the crowd with the patience of a predator. Every nerve in his body hummed with warning. A sly, scarred man with cigar clamped between yellow teeth leaned over the railing. "She's mine," he growled, his words carrying the weight of menace. "Not on my watch." Cade's voice rolled across the room like distant thunder. The low timbre silenced the murmurs, the crowd shuffling uneasily. Men turned to look at him, and the giant cowboy's presence was a wall no one dared breach. The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously. "And nobody interrupts the bid." "Don't touch her," Cade bellowed, stepping forward. His hands flexed, fingers twitching as if ready to strike, and the room seemed to contract under his fury. The scar man's grin faltered, a flicker of fear crossing his weathered face. Lily's eyes lifted to Cade, a spark of hope shining through her fear. Her lips trembled as she whispered, barely audible, "Who are you?" "Someone who won't let them hurt you," he said, his voice softer now, rough with unshed emotion. He moved with astonishing speed for a man his size, sweeping Lily into his arms. The crowd gasped. The creak of floorboards and clink of spurs marked the rhythm of escape as he strode toward the door. Outside, the sun burned low over the horizon, painting the prairie in streaks of gold and crimson. Dust swirled around them as Cade vaulted onto his horse, Lily clinging tightly to his chest. The wind tugged at their hair and clothes, carrying the scent of sage and danger. For a heartbeat, all was chaos and adrenaline. Then, beneath it, a strange, tender pulse. The fragile trust of a child placed in the arms of a giant protector. The first ember connection in a world where shadows whispered and the west was unforgiving. "Hold on tight," Cade murmured, pressing Lily closer. "I won't let anything happen to you." And with a powerful kick of the horse, they were gone, riding headlong into the dusty horizon, where danger, adventure, and something dangerously like hope awaited. Chapter 2. A Giant's Rescue. Dust swirled in thick, golden clouds as Cade vaulted onto his horse, Lily clinging to him like a fragile flame. The auction house shrank behind them, its shouts and threats fading into the distance, replaced by the pounding of hooves against dry, cracked earth. The horizon bled amber and crimson as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the endless prairie. Every gust of wind carried the scent of danger, cactus blooms, gunpowder, and the faint tang of blood. "Hold on tighter," Cade shouted over the roar of the wind, his massive frame braced against the horse's powerful strides. Lily's small arms wrapped around his neck, and for the first time since the auction began, her trembling ease replaced by a flicker of trust. You saved me," she gasped, her voice a whisper above the pounding hooves. "You're not going back there," Cade replied, his voice rough, low, and filled with a fierce conviction. His dark eyes scanned the horizon, every nerve alert to movement, every muscle coiled like a spring. "Nobody touches you, not while I'm around." A sudden whistle of a bullet tore through the air, kicking up dust at the horse's hooves. Cade ducked instinctively, heart hammering, and hissed, "Damn it!" He spurred the horse faster, weaving through a narrow gulch where the canyon walls rose like jagged teeth. Lily clung tighter, her hair whipping across her tear-streaked face. "You're scary," she said, her voice barely audible. "Scary enough to keep you safe," he murmured, his lips brushing her hair as he glanced down. The faintest flicker of a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, though the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. Ahead, the shadowed figures of the auctioneer's men appeared, galloping fast and shouting curses. Cade's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the reins like iron. He could feel every heartbeat of his horse, every jolt of the terrain beneath them, every tremor of Lily's small body against his chest. "We can't outrun them forever," she whispered, voice trembling. "Then we fight if we have to," Cade replied, a dangerous glint in his dark eyes. "But I promise, I won't let a single hair on your head get hurt." The wind stung their eyes as they rounded a bend, dust plumes rising in their wake. Cade's mind raced. He needed a plan, a place to hide, somewhere the ruthless men wouldn't follow. Up ahead, a cluster of sandstone cliffs offered cover, and with a deft flick of his reins, he guided the horse into a narrow canyon. The pursuers, too large to follow, were forced to halt, shouting in frustration. For a moment, silence wrapped around them like a fragile shield. Lily exhaled, resting her cheek against Cade's chest, and he felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest, a tether forming between them, forged in fear and courage. You really are big," she said softly, tilting her head to look up at him. "And I'll get even bigger if anyone tries to touch you again," he murmured, his lips brushing the top of her hair. The words were half jest, half promise, but the intensity in his eyes spoke of a vow unbreakable as the desert rocks around them. The sun slipped lower behind the canyon, painting the sky with fire and gold. Cade and Lily rode on in silence, hearts pounding, bound by trust forged in the chaos of escape. Out there in the wide-open west, danger still loomed, but for the first time, amidst dust and gunfire, a fragile, dangerous hope began to grow. Chapter 3. Campfire Confessions. The canyon walls rose like silent sentinels around them, jagged and red in the dying glow of the sun. Cade had guided his horse into a shelter hollow, where the wind softened and the dust settled, leaving only the whisper of sagebrush and the distant howl of a lone coyote. He dismounted with practiced ease, muscles rippling under the fading light, and carefully set Lily on her feet. Her small form wobbled slightly, but she steadied herself, clutching the reins of trust that he had built between them. I've never been this far from the town," Lily said softly, her voice trembling like the flicker of the fire Cade had begun to build. Sparks rose and danced in the wind as he coaxed dry brush into a flame. The fire roared to life, casting long shadows across the canyon walls and painting their faces in warm amber light. "You'll be safe here for now," Cade murmured, kneeling beside the fire and tossing another branch onto the flames. His gaze lingered on her, dark and unreadable, but soft around the edges. "Out there," he gestured toward the fading light beyond the canyon. "They won't find us." Lily sank onto a flat rock beside him, knees drawn up to her chest. I thought no one would ever come for me," she whispered, eyes glistening in the firelight. "Everyone just wanted to take me." Cade's jaw tightened. He clenched his fists, then relaxed, letting the firelight reveal the faint scars on his knuckles, a testimony to his own battles. "I'm here. I came for you, and I'm not going anywhere." The words were rough, but their weight carried a promise deeper than any bullet. Silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of flames and the distant call of night birds. Cade tossed a piece of wood onto the fire, sparks flying like golden fireflies. "You're brave, you know," he said finally, his voice softer now. "More than most. That's why I can't just leave you." Lily's eyes met his, wide and curious. "I'm scared, but I feel safe with you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The confession hung in the air, fragile and electric, like the first pulse of lightning before a desert storm. Cade exhaled slowly, running a hand over his rugged face, the stubble scratching against his palm. "I've carried a lot of people before, but never someone like you, someone who matters this much." He paused and added, almost to himself, "Hell, I'm not sure I've even mattered to anyone before." The firelight reflected in Lily's eyes, making them shimmer like tiny stars. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing his rough hand. "You do to me," she said softly, her voice certain, even in fear. A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at Cade's lips. For a long moment, they simply sat together, the fire casting warmth and shadows across their faces, two souls tethered in the vast, unforgiving west. The canyon, the wind, the distant coyotes, all of it faded into the background. There was only this fragile trust, this dangerous, growing connection. Above them, the first stars began to pierce the velvet sky. Cade tilted his head slightly, eyes meeting hers. "Tomorrow we'll keep moving. But tonight, just know that you're safe. With me." And in the quiet desert night, with fire crackling between them, Lily finally allowed herself to believe it. Chapter 4. The Town of Broken Dreams. The town of Blackridge emerged from the horizon like a mirage, wooden facades gleaming in the late morning sun, dust swirling around wagon wheels and horses' hooves. Cade led Lily down the main street, the sound of spurred boots echoing against creaking signs and weathered porches. Saloon doors swung open, spilling laughter, piano music, and the clinking of glasses into the streets. The air smelled of whiskey, leather, and a faint tang of gunpowder, a scent that promised both danger and opportunity. This is your town?" Lily asked, glancing nervously at the rough men leaning against posts, hats pulled low over eyes, cigars clenched between teeth. "No," Cade said, scanning the streets with the intensity of a predator. "But it'll do for now. We need work, supplies, and somewhere to lie low." His hand brushed hers for a fleeting moment as they walked, the touch brief but grounding, and Lily's stomach fluttered despite the tension. They found a small stable at the edge of town, the smell of hay and horses thick but welcoming. Cade tethered their horses and kept a watchful eye on the street, noticing the subtle signs of trouble. A crooked sheriff, a man with a scar running down his cheek, and a lingering gaze that made Lily's heart tighten. Inside the saloon, the wooden floor groaned under their boots. The piano player's melodies struggled to compete with rowdy laughter and shouted bets. Cade's eyes never left the room's corners, noting every movement, every man who might threaten Lily. She, meanwhile, hid behind him, clinging to the fold of his coat as if it were armor. A man with a crooked smile and a glint of malice in his eyes sidled up the bar, whispering to the bartender. Cade noticed the exchange immediately, and his fingers twitched near the revolver at his hip. "Stay behind me," he murmured, low in warning, his gaze fixed on the man. The tension snapped when the man stepped closer, reaching as if to touch Lily's arm. Cade's hand shot out, gripping the man's wrist with a vice-like strength. "Back off," he growled, his voice a low rumble that silenced nearby chatter. The man faltered, then smirked, testing Cade's patience. A sudden flash of movement. A table overturned, a chair swung, and Cade's warning became action. The saloon erupted into chaos. Lily pressed herself against Cade, her pulse racing with fear and adrenaline. Yet beneath it all, there was a strange thrill, a spark of something dangerous and intoxicating. Cade's hand brushed her hair back, his fingers lingering a moment too long, and she felt a flush of warmth despite the chaos. when the dust settled and the men were thrown out or nursing bruised egos. Cade lowered his hand but kept his gaze on the door. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough but gentle. Lily nodded, her small hand brushing against his. I think so." Her eyes met his, wide and trusting, and for the first time she felt something resembling safety, and more than a hint of something else, something thrilling and new, stirring in her chest. The sun dipped lower behind Blackridge's rooftops, painting the town in shadows and gold. Cade and Lily left the saloon together, a fragile but growing bond between them, hearts still racing from the day's tension. Somewhere in the dusty streets and saloon chatter, danger still lurked, but so did trust and maybe, just maybe, the first sparks of love. Chapter 5. Dust, Blood, and Promises. The desert sun blazed overhead, relentless and unforgiving, as Cade and Lily rode hard across the open prairie. Dust churned beneath the hooves of their horses, rising in golden clouds that glimmered like fire in the midday light. Cade's jaw was tight, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the gang that had refused to let Lily go. Her small hands gripped his coat, the leather warm under her fingers, yet trembling with a mix of fear and awe. "They're close," Cade muttered, voice low, tense, as the faint thud of approaching hooves reached his ears. Lily's heart skipped at the sound. She could see the shadows of men stretching across the sand, figures moving with purpose and malice. "Cade, what do we do?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the pounding of hooves and wind. "We fight if we have to," he said, dark eyes blazing with determination. He slid a hand to his revolver, fingers brushing the cool steel. "And I swear no one's hurting you today." The gang emerged from behind a ridge, dusty silhouettes armed with rifles and pistols. Cade nudged his horse forward, closing the distance, his massive frame cutting an intimidating figure. "Stay down," he barked, pulling Lily closer against his chest. Her hair whipped across her face, and he tucked a strand behind her ear without breaking stride. The first shots rang out, bullets kicking up sparks as they struck rocks and wood. Cade's horse swerved expertly, weaving between the hail of gunfire. He returned fire, each shot precise, his body moving as though in perfect harmony with the animal beneath him. Lily clung to him, her small frame pressed against his, heart hammering, not just from fear, but from the undeniable thrill of being near him, protected by his fierce strength. One of the gang members broke from cover, aiming directly at Lily. Cade's hand shot out, grabbing the man's arm mid-swing, twisting him off balance before sending him tumbling into the sand. Lily gasped, eyes wide, and Cade's rough voice murmured in her ear, almost tender, "You're safe. I've got you." Hours seemed to blur into minutes as a battle raged across the desert, the sun dipping toward the horizon, painting the sand red like spilled blood. Finally, with grit, skill, and a surge of fury, Cade faced the gang leader in a tense standoff. The man lunged, and Cade met him with unyielding strength and a single, decisive shot. Silence fell, heavy and complete, broken only by the labored breathing of horse and rider. Lily stepped close, brushing sand from Cade's coat. You saved me," she whispered, voice trembling. Her hand lingered over his, small and delicate, a stark contrast to his rough, scarred palm. "And I will keep doing it," Cade said, lowering his gaze to meet hers. The fire of the desert sunset reflected in his eyes, warm and dangerous, like the promise of storm. No matter what comes next. For the first time, amidst dust, blood, and gunfire, they allowed themselves a moment of connection, an unspoken vow forged in danger and trust. The wind carried across the prairie, the echo of their hearts and the promise of something more, something fragile but real in the unforgiving west. As the last light of day painted the horizon in gold and crimson, Cade swung a leg off his horse, kneeling to Lily's height. "We'll survive this. Together." She nodded, eyes shimmering with both fear and hope, and for the first time in a long, terrifying journey, they both believed it. Chapter 6. Sunset on the Heart. The prairie stretched endlessly beneath a sky painted with molten gold and fiery crimson, the wind soft now, carrying only the whisper of sagebrush and the distant howl of a lone coyote. Cade rode beside Lily, their horses' hooves kicking up little puffs of dust that glittered in the dying light. For the first time since the auction, there was no chase, no threat. Only the vast, open expanse of the west and the fragile promise of freedom. "You think's really over?" Lily asked, her voice soft, almost tentative. She adjusted the reins, eyes fixed on the horizon, but she didn't let go of Cade's hand resting lightly on the saddle horn. "For now," Cade replied, his voice low, carrying the weight of exhaustion and relief. He glanced at her, taking in the dust on her cheeks, the wind-tangled strands of her hair, and the way her small hand fit almost perfectly into the larger curve of his own. His heart thudded in a way that had nothing to do with horses or danger. They rode in silence for a few moments, the kind of silence that felt full rather than empty, like the world itself had paused to watch them. Cade finally dismounted onto a ridge overlooking a wide, quiet valley, the sun casting long shadows across the red-tinged rocks. He helped Lily down, and she landed softly, brushing the dust from her dress. It's beautiful," she murmured, eyes wide as they drank in the golden light. The sweeping valleys and the endless sky stretching in every direction. "Not as beautiful as you," Cade said, his voice rough but earnest, and he felt a warmth rise in his chest at the blush that colored her cheeks. Lily's eyes widened, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to shrink around them. Just fire, dust, and the sound of their hearts beating in tandem. He stepped closer, the long shadows of the canyon stretching behind them like silent witnesses. "I've spent most of my life running," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Running from what I couldn't face, from people I couldn't save. But I won't run from you. Not ever." Lily's small hand reached up, brushing against his jaw, tracing the line of his face with a tender curiosity. I trust you, Cade. I always have," she said softly, the words carrying a courage that belied her years. He lowered his forehead to hers, the wind tugging gently at their hair, carrying the scent of dust, sage, and the lingering heat of the day. "Then we'll face the world together," he murmured, and for the first time, he let himself truly believe it. The sky blazed as the sun slipped below the horizon, streaking the valley with fire and gold. Cade took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, and together they watched the last light fade. The threats of the West, the danger, the violence, they were still out there, somewhere, but for now, in this moment, there was only trust, connection, and the fragile bloom of love. "Promise me something?" Lily asked, voice small but steady. "Anything," he replied without hesitation. "That we'll always find each other, no matter what." Cade's lips brushed her hair as he pressed a kiss to her forehead, a vow sealed in firelight. "I promise." As night fell and stars pricked the velvet sky, Cade and Lily stood together on that ridge, hearts tethered, souls entwined, the wide, wild west stretching endlessly before them. Dust, blood, danger, and love, they had survived it all. And now, beneath the endless sky, they could finally breathe, finally hope, and finally belong to each other and to the land that had shaped them. The sun hung low over the endless plains, painting the horizon in molten gold and deep crimson, dust swirling in lazy spirals across the prairie. Cade's horse snorted, shifting its weight on the warm earth, while Lily's small hand rested in his, fingers entwined like a promise neither wanted to break. In the distance, the faint strains of Saloon piano drifted on the wind, mingling with the rustle of sagebrush and the soft whistle of a lone coyote. They had come so far, from the cruel auction house, through gunfire and dust storms, across towns filled with suspicion and danger. Now, standing on a ridge overlooking a quiet valley, The weight of fear and chaos seemed to lift with the setting sun. Cade's rugged features softened as he looked down at Lily, her hair catching the light like spun gold, her eyes reflecting both courage and hope. "I promised I'd keep you safe," he murmured, his voice low and rough, yet tender. "But you've shown me it's not just about protection. It's about being brave enough to love." Lily's lips curved into a small, confident smile, the shadows of the past finally fading. "Then we'll face everything together, Cade," she whispered, "no matter what the West throws at us." Cade pulled her close, forehead resting against hers as the wind tugged at their hair. Around them, the plain stretched endless and wild, but for the first time, danger felt like a distant memory. The horses pawed at the ground, the saloon music faint and carefree, and the sky burned with fire and gold. With the horizon at their backs, Cade pressed a gentle kiss to her brow. "We're home," he said. And in that moment, with dust, wind, and sunlight surrounding them, they truly were together, free, and ready to write the rest of their story.